Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks, where kindred souls gather to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as a February room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for Composite Development's fly rods and fishing accessories. Tech, precision, ingenuity, legacy. Go to cdfishing.us and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's your host, Lauren Carnop, and this is the February Room.
Welcome to the February Room. Today, my guest is Chef PJ Burgess, also known as a sundress chef. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
And PJ, I have to say the sundress chef is such a beautiful name because if you go to your website, you have a long dress, you're very tall. How tall are you?
6 foot.
6 foot tall, and you have had an amazing past of cooking for these fishing lodges. And I know you've had a lot of opportunity to have fishing stories and also being the liaison between lodge owners and guides. And I bet you have some fishing stories that you could share with me today.
Okay. Well, one of the first stories that I wrote, and I wrote these stories because working at a lodge straight for 5 months at a time and being what I call shackled to the kitchen, I didn't get to leave very often. One stretch, I worked for 7 weeks without a day off, 14-hour days. And I had never really written anything before. And so I thought I'm going to try my hand at creative writing. And so that's what I would do when I was winding down, when I was off work at 10 o'clock at night. And so this first story is, one of the first stories that I wrote is called Used Fish Salesman. And the reason is because the guides have, for the most part, they have A-plus personalities. They have to entertain the clients while they're rowing down the river, and they've got to be gung-ho. And so they have that. I just worked that personality into the story. So it's like used car salesman. What do we have to do to get you into some used fish today? Because the fish are catch and release. So like used cars. And so, yeah, the majority of guides that I had the pleasure of working around, except for very rare exceptions, had very personable and enthusiastic A-type personalities. It just goes with the territory for, as I jokingly call them, catch and release used fish salesmen. I could just picture, I have a boundless imagination, I guess you could say, for the culinary arts, but then also for storytelling. And I could picture in my mind's eye these river reeler dealers, as I call them, in front of their drift boats pitching the phrase, "What will it take to get you into some used fish today?" Fishing guides really love what they do, and they demonstrate it every day with their enthusiastic attitude, no matter what the weather. A fishing guide's day does not begin when they launch on the river, nor end after delivering clients back to the lodge. They must clean out their boat and vehicle, check equipment, prepare and pack river lunches, match the day's hatch from their stash of hand-tied flies. They're the ultimate multitaskers. For their clients' safety, they must be experts at rowing and reading ever-changing water conditions. They often spend a good part of the day dodging back-cast hooks, switching out flies, and untangling birds' nests of leader tangled by novice or weekend fly fishers. And my days as a chef were equally long and filled with culinary multitasking from dawn until way past dark. It was my job to wow guests with my culinary talents. And this I did more for the pleasure of pleasing than for money. Most lodge clients spent more for their once or twice yearly fly fishing vacations than I made in an entire 5-month season. But at this time, I'm doing more of what I love rather and working on selling my dreams with my seasonings than selling somebody else's dreams.
I love, PJ, that you have this great admiration for fishing guides, as well as understanding that what their jobs are is like a lot more than just getting people on fish. They're whining and dining, and like you said, kind of that used car salesman's personality. A lot of people are probably curious, why do you call yourself the sundress chef?
Well, the first lodge that I worked at way back in 2009, when as I jokingly say, I ran away from home to join the fly fishing circuit. It just had solar-fed batteries and a backup propane generator and no air conditioning. And 2009 was a hot summer. And so I started wearing sundresses and it was a laid back place anyway. So I started wearing sundresses. And that kind of carried over to the next lodge where I worked, which I was the executive chef there. And so I would take and go out and greet the clients as they came in with appetizers when they came off the river. And then I would quickly change my clothes after I get out the 4-course dinners. I would quickly change my clothes into a sundress and I would come out and serve the first dessert plate. And usually I would have, they would ask questions about the meal. And so I would answer questions, and then I would maybe, say something about Montana or crack a joke or something like that. So I'll give you an instance of a joke that I told. So this fly fishing lodge, it had a rather large fly shop. And the owner bragged about his, I think it was 2,000 bins of flies. And so I would serve the dessert plate and then talk about the food. And then I said, okay, this lodge, if you've been there, has a fly shop with 3,000 bins of flies. And that's bins of flies. So we're talking probably hundreds of thousands of flies. But no real killer fly, as the guides would call them, like the Scud missile fly or the spinner bomber fly. And so that's kind of what I would do. I would take different things that I observed as being funny and get the clients laughing.
Oh gosh. I mean, your job was probably just as much as work as trying to be a fishing guide. You got to keep your clientele happy, and that's with your food and personality. So, a fishing lodge chef, what separates you from being a chef, say in a different restaurant? What is the unique thing of being a fishing lodge chef?
Well, the unique thing for me, I mean, not all fishing lodge chefs would do this. Some of them would just they just wanted to do their cooking thing, stay in the back, not interact. And with me, I loved working in the fly fishing lodges because I got to interact. I wasn't stuck in the back of the kitchen. And I just loved going out and talking, visiting during happy hour. I had one occasion where I went up to this blonde gentleman, and he put out his hand, and he said, "Hi, I'm Barry. I'm a psychologist." And I said, "Oh, nice to meet you, Barry. I'm wondering, you're a psychologist? I was wondering if you could do something about my restless mind syndrome." And he says, "Restless mind syndrome, what's that?" And I said, "Well, it's like restless legs, only it's your brain is running a marathon in your head." and and I turned around to he laughed. He put his head back and laughed, and I walked away. And then I got to thinking, you know what? He's never heard of restless mind syndrome because I made it up. I hope he doesn't write a best-selling novel using my self-diagnosis and make $1 bazillion off of it.
But maybe he can start curing it, right? Or maybe it's a good thing not to cure. I think as a chef, you're constantly having to explore new recipes. And I'm curious, is there a recipe for you that was always a hit at those lodges?
Oh, there were quite a few that were a hit. Probably my hot bourbon steak was one. My dishes, what I did was I created this crescendo, like Jaws. You build up like frenzy, like a fish feeding frenzy. So
Yes.
So when clients would come in, I had an order of which that I presented dishes. So the first night would be really easy. It would be like my citrus stuffed game hen, because chicken's safe. Most people eat it. You'd always have a backup, but it's a safe one to start. And then each dish would become just better. I rarely ever used any recipes. They're all my own. Either I invented them or I took something and changed it, because I would often say, I can never leave well enough alone. I have to put my own twist on it, like the old fractured fairy tales. I'm fracturing the standard culinary methods and recipes and making up my own.
Well, I think that you call it, is it Southwest meets Northwest, right? Is your kind of style of cooking?
Northwest meets Southwest in fusion cuisine. I take the ingredients from the Northwest and my love for Southwestern food and my many, many trips to Mexico and combine that.
We used your the rub for our elk, and I think what's so great about your seasonings is that it complements like Montana. It tastes like Montana. You're not taking away from the food itself, like you're honoring the meat or you're honoring the fish, and you're just accelerating those taste buds to complement the meat. And I think that's such a unique taste, because sometimes I feel like people who cook wild game tend to just like unload so much stuff that it loses the genuine taste of it. And I just thought that was such a good compliment for our dish for dinner. It was so incredible. I think we put like mashed potatoes. It was your true Montana elk meat and potatoes and veggies.
My seasonings, I made them all natural on purpose. Not even any sodium dioxide to keep it from caking. I used raw sugar rather than brown sugar. Brown sugar is usually used in rubs, but then you have to add sodium dioxide, which is really super, super, super finely ground glass.
I didn't know that. I do not want to be eating glass with my elk. I'll have a glass of wine, but I don't want the glass in my food.
Well, it's like silica, though. Silica is a natural compound that's basically the same thing that we have to have in our bodies. But I wanted my seasonings to be all natural, and then like and I called them Montana Gold seasonings.
Why Montana Gold?
Well, that's what brought a lot of people, the first settlers to Montana, other than for trading, was to work in the mines, gold mines, copper mines, and I wanted them to be worth their weight in gold, I guess.
Oh, I love that. That's so great.
For instance, the summer savory, which is a lighter seasoning, it has savory in it, which is rarely used. It has a unique flavor, but then it also has ground Mexican oregano. I use Mexican oregano instead of your standard oregano almost exclusively because I think it has a better taste. And it's not really oregano, it's in the family of marjoram rather than oregano, but it has a more intense flavor, and so I use it in my sauces. One of the sauces that I received a lot of applause over was my huckleberry meat sauce.
Ooh.
Which is made with the rub and seasoning that you used on the elk. So it's more savory than sweet, and it really makes wild game taste outstanding. And how I came up with that was I was reading about the Native Americans, and they would take berries and pound them into the buffalo meat or elk meat or venison, and then hang them over the wood smoke to make jerky out of it. And that way they kept from getting scurvy because of the vitamin C in the berries. And then it would also have the meat taste better.
Wow, I had no idea. That is such an amazing, interesting, and great concept. Did you use fresh huckleberries?
I used fresh, but you can also use huckleberry jam, which is what I put on the recipe on the back of the package.
Okay, because I was going to say I would love to do that, but huckleberry season is now gone. Now we're in Thanksgiving, and I bet you, for me, I was so excited to talk to you because I'm like, I want to know what a chef from Montana who has a fishing lodge, what would be the best Thanksgiving food setup for a fishing lodge chef?
Well, as far as turkey goes, you could bake a turkey and slice it and put the huckleberry meat sauce on it. But you could also use game hen. I used game hen a lot just because you could take and bake them whole, and you could serve a whole game hen to someone with more of an appetite, and then half it and serve it, to someone with less of an appetite, and your flavors are stronger. As far as side dishes, what I would make instead often, and it would carry over into the guide lunches, was I would take sweet potatoes or yams, and I would season them with the steak rub and grill them off, and then I would take corn, and I like to use the canned corn and drain it, and then I would take and grill the corn in a pan and put the seasoning on that as well, and then cool it off and add onion and celery, and it makes a very unique Thanksgiving Day dish.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so incredible. I mean, I even saw on your blog, for the dessert. I'm like, I really want to do the Montana mudslide. That looks incredible and delicious.
I would like to come make it for you sometime.
Yeah, that would be, I just need to have you come to my place for Thanksgiving and cooking. Cause my husband's going to go bird hunting next weekend. So I was just thinking, things are going in my brain. I'm like, oh, okay, we're gonna do the hen thing. I'm gonna do the side dish, and then I'm gonna do this Montana mudslide dessert. Right now, I'm actually just thinking about it. I'm getting pretty hungry, but yeah, what a great way that your restless mind is working in there. It's a special treat.
Well, here's something that's really simple to do for Thanksgiving. And I came about it by accident, which is kind of how it happens. But I was making pumpkin pie. And so I had a lot of the pumpkin batter left over. I thought, what am I going to do with this? And so I took a box of cornbread mix and just added that to the pumpkin batter and put it in a pan and baked it. And it's cornbread that doesn't fall apart. It has a pumpkin flavor. It's extremely moist. And then what I would do was I would put real maple syrup on top so it soaked in a little, and then sprinkle pumpkin seeds on top of it.
This sounds like a delicious breakfast, like with coffee or...
It's good any time. I mean, it's more cake-like than you just add less of the mix and have it be more like cake batter rather than cornbread batter, and it's more cake-like. And so for dessert one time, I split it in half, and I filled the center with marshmallow cream with nutmeg in it.
Oh my gosh. I just feel like my stomach is growling just listening to this. It sounds so good. I know we talked about like how you had to like prep for the guides so they can go out and feed their clients. Did a guide ever have a crazy story being on the river?
Yeah, I wrote about one. And I entitled it the Great Egg on My Face River Disaster of 2010. And for river lunches, I would hard boil 3 or 4 dozen eggs at a time. I put the cooked eggs on a shelf above the raw eggs in the walk-in cooler. In the mornings, I would take the hard-boiled eggs from the shelf and put them in 2 serving bowls, a small bowl on the table in the guides' room for their buffet lunch, and a larger bowl out on the dining room buffet table for guests. And every evening around 7 p.m., the guides would return their lunch containers, drop them off into the kitchen. And one evening, the first guide came in, and he said with a smile, "I thought someday someone would do this to me." And I asked what happened, and he said, "I went to crack my hard-boiled egg on my leg and ended up with egg running down my pants." I timidly raised my hand and said, "I guess that someone would be me." Luckily, good sense of humor, and I said, "Well, I guess the yoke is definitely on me," which he laughed. And I said, then I said, "Oh my gosh, I wonder if any of the other guides got egged." And sure enough, the next guide that came in, I asked him, "Did you get any raw eggs in your boat?" And he replied, "Well, the clients didn't, but I did. Luckily, it broke in my lunch bag. Unluckily, it was in with my sandwich." I apologized again, and this went on for a couple of more guides. And I was kind of nervous because the owner was very, I'll say, stern. But that night at the table, the stories, it had the clients laughing. None of the guests got egged. Theirs came from the buffet table with the hard boiled eggs. They said we were laughing so hard we were almost falling out of the boats. The clients were saying, and it was so funny around the table that the owner didn't say a word to me.
Oh man. See, I mean, I feel like anybody in any of their professions, whether it's cooking as a guide, having experiences where you've just didn't do something what you're supposed to do, and the like that stomach pit feeling. I mean, I've been there so many times where I've done something. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am beyond sweaty and nervous, but I'm happy that yours turned out on the happier end as opposed to on the more stern side of everything.
Well, actually, it gave me the inspiration for coming up with an idea for the river, for the boats on the river, which was I took my salsa recipe, which is on back the salsa package. I call it poor man's salsa because it doesn't. It requires canned tomatoes, and it turns out it tastes really good. But I made a aspect out of the salsa. And then I took the hard-boiled egg, peeled it, cut it in half. I filled the little Glad cups with the salsa with hard-boiled egg in it, and then put sour cream with cilantro and sunflower seed pesto in it on top, covered the lid, and it worked out really well. There's no peels in the boat. There's no egg smell, and so everybody's happy.
Well, see, something good came out of that mistake. I love it. I think it's so great that you took a learning moment to make it into even a more positive moment. You have a website, so if anybody's even interested in these seasonings, which you should, the holidays are coming up. It's time to roll up those sleeves. It's COVID. You can start expanding your chef expertise. But you also are offering classes in Eureka, Montana. So maybe you want to get away. Can you give a little bit more information about these classes?
With so many people, their hectic, crazy lives over the last couple of decades, they don't cook at home as much. A lot of them are not learning because their parents aren't cooking. It's fast food. And so my classes I call them simply gourmet cooking classes. It's ironic that there's such a tremendous growth in the foodies and gourmet cooking on TV, but not so much, I don't think, in the homes. And the word gourmet may be daunting to some, but it's not daunting when it's broken down into cooking basics. And that's what this course will be. And it'll be for everyone, starting from novice, I'm thinking 12 years old, up to, anyone that would like to learn gourmet cooking techniques, which will include prepping skills, grilling and broiling, steaming, sautéing, frying, braising, roasting. And these are all the essential cooking skills that are done in different ways, but the same basic thing the world over. And then also I put my own twist on everything, like I do with my recipes. And so, I still keep some of the ingredients, salt, butter, eggs, cream, yet the focus is on moderation. The great chefs of today have not abandoned the use of these ingredients, but instead have put more focus into incorporating the use of herbs, spices, natural flavoring agents for healthier substitutes. And so that's what I do with my huckleberry meat sauce. It's wine-based. The alcohol cooks out, so that shouldn't affect anybody that's not a drinker.
Mm-hmm.
And so
For kids
there's
and everything.
huckleberry wine sauce has no fat. It's very rich without having any type of fat in it. And just basic cooking sauces. I'll have two versions. I'll have a healthier alternative, and then the rich and decadent, because most people don't stick to diets because they miss all the decadent treats. Well, you can make even decadent treats healthier.
I feel that a lot of people during COVID are eating a lot. There's the presidential election is having people stress eat. So I think it's great to be able to have quality food without the sacrifice of maybe your waistline.
Right, and more people are eating at home now. But it's not only the cooking classes that I'll be doing. It's there'll be it'll be a menu too as well. So at the end of the 3 hours of demonstrations, then everybody will sit down to a 3 or 4 course dinner and actually get to eat the food.
I think the one thing that people can probably really connect with is food. And I think it's so great that you're offering these services. And I think it's great, especially with the holidays coming up. I think people start to scratch their heads and, it's like, oh, we do the same thing every time. So I think these are great options. And I also want to say, if people want to learn more about who you are, maybe want to buy some seasonings, or maybe just look at some of your blogs with the recipes, what's the best method of them reaching out to you?
Well, it's easy. My website for the seasonings is just sundresschef.com. Up in the right-hand corner is blog, a blog button. Click on the blog button, and that will take you to recipes and stories from the lodges. I'm going to be adding more recipes here this winter. I do most of my writing in the winter.
I think I'm going to have a request that I want the recipe for that pumpkin pie cornbread.
I will.
That one sounds incredible.
I'll be putting it on the website, but I can certainly email that to you. Another idea for Thanksgiving that I do is I take acorn squash and I half it, clean the seeds out, bake it so it's about halfway done, and then make up cornbread batter, and you can do this from box or scratch, and then put it in the half-baked squash shells and bake it, and then you have your cornbread in. It makes a great presentation. You just cut the halves in quarters and put them on the plate, and it makes a great side dish.
Brilliant, because I always feel like there's like sometimes those squashes, you're just like, what else could I do with this? And it's always like, is it just a decoration piece? I mean, you can only do so much. So what a great way to think out of the box. I love the acorn squash. I'm going to try that. I also recommend people who are listening and want to kind of follow you. You do have an Instagram account, and that it's Sundress Chef, correct?
Yes, I think it's Sundress Lodge Chef. I'm not sure. I think it's...
Yep, Sundress Lodge Chef. And and I just appreciate you telling me your stories, because you do have plenty of history of being in Montana with your family here. I recommend looking at your blog, reading it, and I'm looking forward to continue on my chef experience with your seasonings. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. What fun.
Go to thefebruaryroom.com, where you can access a complete library of our podcast and read more about our guests, their fishing stories, and favorite fly patterns. We're always looking for exceptional fly fishing yarns, and if you have one to spin, shoot us an email at info@thefebruaryroom.com. The February Room is always free, but if you feel like throwing a nickel in the pond, we appreciate any additional listener support. For companies and individuals interested in sponsorship opportunities, please contact us for our media kit. Thanks for stopping by the February Room, and we'll see you down here next week.